Hi there. Welcome, welcome everyone. So we're back with how to raise your vibration. Again, my name is Akasha Searcy, and I really hope that you've been enjoying this 5-day series. And today I'm really talking about one that I think is for a lot of people, it creates a bit of an aha moment, right? So in this series, I should say, so far, we've been discussing how we raise our vibration. And before we even started this journey of how to raise our vibration, we even discussed like how energy works. So there's a playlist that I've created for this series called Create Your Own Reality, because that is by far, I believe, one of the most potent aspects of using these tools to raise your vibration. So, why to me does this matter? Because I am here to help people with tangible tools recognize and realize their level best. And I really want that because I know that as a free sovereign being, each one of us that takes responsibility for our own experience changes the whole collective. And today's topic is one that I think is really potent. I think it's really powerful. And you can notice that there's no graphic today because it's something that I will be sharing at the very end underneath the video. So you'll be able to find that. But what I really want to talk about today are honoring your feelings. And I think that this is something that a lot of people, not a lot, all of us, I believe, have been programmed to suppress our feelings. And so we walk around in this overstimulated, underexpressed, numb state. And I really think that when we take our time to dive into those feelings and understand what they correspond to. And this is really a big one for those of you that maybe are watching these videos and you're taking some notes, because I've been getting your private messages and I'm really excited that you're enjoying these. I really want you to think about, as you navigate the correspondence between the stimulus and your response. So the trigger and what emotions are triggered, as you understand the correspondence between those two things, what you're really doing is affecting all of humanity. And I think that that's something that a lot of people underestimate. And I want to dive into that a little bit more as we continue to have this conversation today. But I want you to think about your nervous system as your motherboard, right? And your nervous system is it's your wiring system, right? It sends all messages. And if you can think of your emotions like applications, then those emotions tell the motherboard exactly what information to bring online to technically spit out the data or the response, right? Or the reaction in this case, because we're talking about emotions. And I will talk about reaction and response because I do believe that those are very different things. And think about on your phone when you have, when you've just got your phone up and you have a bunch of apps going, a bunch of applications going, then what you're going to notice is that the battery drains faster, right? And the battery is connected to the motherboard. So if we take this metaphor and we think about this from the perspective of our nervous system. So when we have our nervous system bombarded with information, expectation, whether those are voiced or unvoiced, our agreements that we've made in life, our agreements that we've made maybe through family, all of these quote unquote pressures. Or again, we go back to all of these different applications of our energy, right? And as all of those things are being navigated throughout our day, what happens is literally our battery drains, our life force wanes, right? And what this means is when your nervous system is very overstimulated and then you get another trigger, what do? A lot of people express anger or they freeze or they run. This is fight, flight, freeze. I always want to add an extra R in there somewhere, right? Flight, fright, and freeze. And these are often adrenalized emotional states, right? And when we aren't honoring our emotions, what we're really doing is just stuffing them down, stuffing them down, stuffing them down. And then when something triggers us, we often just go into that animal brain. This is called lizard functioning when you're in that fight, flight, freeze state. And when you go into that space, what happens is it's really hard for you to respond appropriately to what is happening. You are usually reacting based on a past paradigm, which has stored emotion. And that was kind of a mouthful, so I want to dive into it a little bit more with you. So, for example, if you find that you are getting frustrated really easy, right? Then what you may start to find is that if you dive into what's going on underneath that frustration, often the correspondence to that frustration is fear of failure, right? And that fear of failure, or what I call FOFU, which is fear of effing up, and it is a real thing. That fear of failure, when we can really look at where the emotional programming came from around that, then we can start clearing up a lot of this automatic frustration that just kind of gets autopiloted by the brain. And I really hope that this is making sense for you guys, because this one is, I believe, besides the breath, the second fastest way that you can really raise your vibration. And there's a lot of language out there about shadow work. And shadow work is, the easiest way for you to think about shadow work, especially if we go to the Jungian premise of what shadow work is. And it's really these parts of ourselves that we don't love. And those parts of ourselves that we don't love are the unintegrated aspects of ourself, aka the shadow, right? And instead of getting into a bunch of psychology, one of the easiest ways to really just have like a straight route, a straight process, is to note the emotion. Ask yourself why you feel that way. And then just listen. Excuse me, just listen, or better yet, write in a journal. I'm a big fan. You guys have seen this from the dream weaving if you've watched that part of the series, right? I have been a journaler for most of my life. I think it is a free therapist. I don't know why people have a block with it. And actually, I do know why people have a block with it. So I'm going to reframe that. People have a block with it because they're afraid of diving into their own stuff, right? And a lot of people say they want the truth, but they're often afraid of it, because the truth, in order to get to it, I believe you need to be willing to dive into the depth of your feelings. And so there's lots of ways to do that. Journaling it often feels like a very safe space, especially if you live by yourself or you have a safe place where you can keep the journal locked up where no one's going to get it. You feel like you have a safe space from which to release those emotions. That simple action of releasing those emotions, it shifts the energy. It's no different than finishing an application on your phone and closing it out. You're not allowing it to continue to operate inside of the system. So if we think about this, you're not allowing the emotional traction to continue to build inside of you by continually thinking about it on the hamster wheel, or by being, obsessed with everyone's going to do X, Y, and Z. So you've got to have that response on the ready, right? That readiness, which is just another way to say you're in a fight state. If you're constantly getting ready for something, that's an overstimulated reactive state, right? If you're always running away from confrontation, that's a great example of flight, right? And if you're always silent in a disagreement or in confrontation, that would be a great example of freeze. And these are all ways that the animal brain, the animal part of us is another way to say it, the old part of us that we have biologically, that hasn't changed since we incepted into a body. But psychologically, the requirements are very different since we incepted into a body. And this is a conversation that I'm always having about biology and psychology. Maybe I'll do a video on that now that I'm talking about it. But this idea that the request of our psychology is exponentially different than our biology. And I really want you to think about this because our biology hasn't really changed that much since we incepted, right? And by inception, I mean came into a physical body. But think about how much technology has changed. Language is changing, social structures have changed. These are all different types of psychological request. And no longer are we running from mountain lions. Yet a lot of us are still programmed with this very primal aspect of when something makes me afraid, I run, I fight, or I freeze. And so when you can start really allowing yourself to honor your emotions, what you'll notice is that that very old, outdated part of you, and don't get me wrong, I do believe that we need fight, flight, freeze because it's a self-protection mechanism, but it's a self-protection mechanism from part of the brain that is very, very old, and it's very animalistic. And our emotions are very complicated and complex because they're also stimulated through the five senses. So when you can honor that something you see brings beauty into your life and you can express that, you're honoring that sensation of feeling that beauty in the body. Right? When you can touch something and, I always like things that have texture, like this is a really furry blanket, and every time I touch it, I just am like, "Oh my god, that's so soft, I love it." And sometimes I'll be like, "Why do I love it?" I love it because and then I'll just have this little conversation with myself about why I love that texture. And what this is doing is it's giving me the language for the landscape. And this is something that I feel is really important and I want to share with you. When I was growing up, I grew up in a house that to me had lots of trauma and had violence. And what I realized was that I stuffed all of my emotions down because that felt safer than the other option, which was if I said my emotions out loud, there could be a kapow, right? If I froze, there could be a multitude of options that happen. And then flight, I could just disappear, I could just hide, right? So I learned at a very early age how to intuit the situation, right? To use my intuition to read the energy of the room. I could feel it. I'm highly empathic. Even as a little kid, I was highly empathic. And I learned to just not say what I was feeling because a lot of times I was feeling other people's emotions. And so that was very complicated for a little kid to weed through who didn't really have the landscape of language for any emotion. So, as an adult in my early 20s, when I started therapy, my therapist would say, "Well, how do you feel?" And I would say, not even aware that I was doing it, I would say, "Well, I don't know how I feel, but this is what I think." And then I would go into my thought process. I would go into the IQ, not the EQ. So, the intelligence quotient of intellect, not that emotional quotient, not the intelligence quotients of the emotions. Which is kind of ironic, right? Because I could read other people's emotions and energy very easily, but I didn't have the language for my own because a lot of the emotional stuff that I was picking up on as a highly empathic and sensitive child was really beyond the scope of the language that was being used in my day-to-day life. And so a lot of my therapy in my life was oriented toward understanding how to correlate sensation, emotion, and thought. You remember that triangular shape that I made yesterday when I said physical body, sensation, thought, mental body, right? Emotion, feeling body. And when we line those three things up, we create this bridge to our higher self. And so your emotions are truly a compass of your consciousness. And this is why I believe it is absolutely tantamount for you to honor your emotions because they show you where you are. And when you know where you want to be, you'll know what that feels like based on how your emotional scale evolves. For myself, I really, I went about it from a very intellectual way because at the time, that's how I really operated in the world. I could think myself into feeling something, but if I felt something, a lot of the times it was either anger or sadness. And what I learned on my journey and what I continue to help others learn on their journey is that those two emotions are the ones that most of us have been programmed are acceptable. And everything else in between, you have been taught or patterned to keep it quiet, to not share that thing that makes you feel ashamed, to not share that thing that might make you feel guilty, to not talk about your doubt, to not talk about your worry, to not be judgmental, to not be critical. These are all things that as you stuff those down and you're not sure even why, they start to really drain the battery of your existence. And not only that, if you're not careful, what starts to happen is it creates a fixed mindset around a feeling. So if you haven't watched How to Raise Your Vibration with Mindset, then go back and watch that because a fixed mindset has a hard time with change. And emotions are mutable if you're familiar with that language. Mutable means that it shifts. It'll be this way, and then the intensity is up here, and then it's down here, and then it's gone. And when you understand that emotions are like that wave pattern, so, right, if you watched how energy works on your spiritual journey, then you'll know that some emotions, there's this crescendo, and then some emotions, there's this valley. And we really want to walk that journey honoring that this is how energy moves. And as we clean up and begin to express. So, as we clean up and correlate thoughts, feelings in the physical body, what you're going to notice is those highs aren't crazy high and those lows aren't crazy low, but you're starting to actually find a center point. And so, this idea of how does, honoring our emotions raise our vibration? And it's going to bring you to this place of really allowing you to start to tune into yourself with a whole new layer of awareness. And when you understand that something makes you feel a certain way, it's triggering you, what happens is you start to have this massive insight that it wasn't the outside thing that created the friction, it was the inside thing that was just waiting for the right trigger. I want to say that again because this is the caveat to how you're raising your vibration with this type of work. It wasn't the outside thing that caused you to feel something. That feeling was already in there. What happened is that feeling is the effect of the outside thing. So the law of cause and effect, right? If you're familiar with your universal laws or your hermetic principles, you're going to understand this. So that outside thing you believe has caused you to have this response, but you are the cause of that effect. And when you can really start wrapping your mind around this, what it will help you do is stop all this inner narrative that may be going on with these suppressed emotions. Because if you can stop pushing those emotions down and allow those emotions to come to the surface, honor your feelings, but not keep stuffing them in, you're going to notice this whole new level of flow that starts to happen. And when that flow starts to happen, all that clogged up stuff moves on out and you feel refreshed. This is also another way to say you've changed your vibration, right? So if you feel like you're walking around stuffing your emotions down, it's going to be really hard for you to make a paradigm shift. So how do we use this tool to continue to raise our vibration? So, what I want you to do is right now, during your day, whether it's the rest of today, whether it's tomorrow or the next few days, or hopefully the rest of your days, is I want you to witness your emotions and just note what you're feeling. Just check, like, think of this as a little tune in. Like, you're driving before you go into the office, you're just going to sit in your car for a moment, take 3 breaths, just go, okay, this is how I'm feeling. Noted. And then go on into the rest of your day. But by taking these little times to just start tapping into your emotional scale, you're going to start becoming aware of your patterns. And as you become aware of your patterns, you're going to start a dialogue with them. And as you start a dialogue with your emotions, things start to change, right? And this is how we raise our vibration. So I want you to think about those feelings. So that's part one. Part two is if you can take those emotions and really notice, where are you feeling them in your body? This was a big one for me. I started understanding that anger felt like this in my body, happiness felt like this in my body, sadness felt like this in my body, because I didn't have the language for the emotion, right? I wasn't allowed to have that as a child. And so, as I was able to understand how my emotions expressed in my body, I was able to bring linguistics to it and thereby produce words to express my emotions. And this is not an uncommon thing. There are a lot of people out there who, when it comes to expressing their emotions, they feel like someone's doing this. They don't know how to do it because no one ever really gave them the language for it. But they have all these body issues going on. You know, inflammation in your body is usually anger, unexpressed anger. Heaviness in your body, excess weight in your body is usually unexpressed sadness and grief. Right? So when we can start understanding how our feelings correlate to physicality and drive our mentality, and we can start honoring that, everything starts to shift. And this is a really potent and powerful time. So I want you to really spend some time, a little bit of time each day. You can think 3 to 5 minutes, whatever that means for you, just noting how you feel, that you're really just taking the moment to consciously just tune in and really try to get to something beyond, I'm tired, I don't wanna go to work. Like, try to go below the surface, because all that surface shit is what is getting in the way. Trust me, I've seen this time and time again with my clients. As soon as you start going below the surface, that's where you're gonna find the turbulence. That's where the current is. And we wanna stop resisting it, because what we resist persists. So we want to let those emotions flow. We want to honor those emotions. We want to express those emotions. And then we want to let them go. Just let them keep going with the flow. So your homework, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to spend some time each day honoring how you feel and then asking yourself, are you expressing those feelings? Are you sharing it? Are you talking to your friends, your spouse? Are you, like, are you expressing these things? I do that with art sometimes, or sometimes I go on Instagram and talk about things, or I speak to my friends. I journal every day. So these are ways that you can express those emotions in whatever way that feels safe to you. But you really want to honor these emotions because they are the compass of your consciousness. And if you can tune that compass to your true north, which I believe is your heart's desire, then you are on your way to living your potential. And your potential is illuminating that light so that you can share your voice, because humanity needs you. So you're going to spend some time today honoring how you feel. Take note of it. Maybe even notice where it is in the body. Maybe you even write it down. And the next thing I'm going to ask you to do is just ask yourself, how can you express those emotions? What feels safe to you to express those emotions? Is it singing? Is it Writing is it those are 2 of my favorite things. Mantra, I do a mantra practice, affirmations, all of those things, and I do them out loud as well as mentally. But what are those ways that you can express your emotions? How can you give yourself permission to feel into the next layer of depth so that you can let go of what's holding you back and allow those emotions to be a compass for the consciousness that you truly desire so that you can live your best life? So, again, as always, thank you so much for showing up for these live sessions. I'm really looking forward to your messages. I've loved all of your comments, and I'll put a comment, or excuse me, a link underneath the video for the emotional scale, which I had mentioned in another video so that you have a visual. Again, I'm a visual learner, so I'll make sure that you have a link to that and really spend some time thinking about, are you speaking about your emotions? Are you honoring how you feel? Are you suppressing your emotions? Are you ready to move beyond the toxicity of fight, flight, and freeze and go a little bit beneath the surface so that you can let go of these things that might be holding you back from living the life that you truly want so that you're functioning at your level best? Because that's what I want for you. And I know that you want it too. All right. I'll see you back here tomorrow at 4. In the meantime, thank you so much for joining me and stay illuminated. Bye, everybody.